chef de l'opposition.
Mr. Speaker, the New York Times reported a decade ago that Canada had the richest middle class in the world, and the median incomes for Canadians were higher than in the United States. Oh, how things have changed after 9 years of liberal taxes, red tape, and attacks on our energy sector. Americans make $32,000 more than Canadians, and now a newly elected American president wants to take our jobs for Americans. We understand why Donald Trump wants to take Canadian jobs, but why does this Prime Minister want to help him?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, when we successfully renegotiated NAFTA and protected Canadian jobs, protected steel workers and aluminum workers, protected our supply managed sectors and agricultural workers, protected Canadians from one coast to coast to coast, from coast to coast to coast, the leader of the Conservative Party at the time referred to our approach as dumb, Mr. Speaker. Successfully standing up for Canadians is not dumb. But you know what is dumb, Mr. Speaker? Refusing to get your security clearance so you can actually protect members of your caucus, so you can protect Canadians, get the briefings necessary on national security.
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Mr. Speaker, his approach was dumb. It was dumb to let the Americans reimpose Buy America rules that Harper had got lifted. It was dumb to let Trump impose softwood lumber tariffs that Biden has now doubled. But you know what is dumb, dumber, and dumbest of all? Imposing a 61-cent a litre carbon tax that will force our trucking companies, our factories, and our mines to head south of the border into the arms of President Trump. We know why he wants to create American jobs with the Canadian money, but why does this Prime Minister want to help him?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, we stood up and protected Canadian jobs, Canadian industry, and Canadian trade. We know that the American government cares about creating prosperity in North America, and we're going to do it together. But what the American government, and particularly this president, also cares about is defense and national security. Well, the leader of the Conservative Party was sitting around the cabinet table when they dropped spending on defense to below 1%, and the Americans won't understand any more than Canadians do why the leader of the opposition refuses to take national security seriously, refuses to get his...
Colleagues, I know it's Wednesday. It's really important, though, that we have an opportunity to only recognize the person who's speaking at the time so that the Speaker can hear what's going on. The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Mr. Speaker, maybe the reason why Conservatives were able to get rid of Buy America and softwood lumber tariffs is because we helped the Americans crush the Taliban and ISIS, whereas this Prime Minister couldn't even shoot down a Chinese weather balloon over northern Canada. Now he wants to impose a tariff on his own companies, a 61-cent a litre carbon tax, 300% higher than it is right now, where there's a 0% carbon tax south of the border. Why does he want to create an avalanche of Canadian businesses, jobs, and paychecks leaving for America?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Speaker, we saw it once again right now. The Conservative leader constantly talking down the members of the Canadian Armed Forces, talking down and nickel and diming our veterans. They shuttered 9 veteran services offices, cut thousands of staff from people helping veterans, and made cuts to the Canadian Armed Forces that brought our spending on defense to below 1%. Mr. Speaker, he won't even commit to our timeline to get it up to 2%. And he will not get his security clearance so he can get the briefing necessary to keep all Canadians safe.
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Monsieur le Président, il y a 10...
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
What President Trump must not understand, must actually find kind of humorous, is that while he wants to take jobs from other countries and give them to Americans, He sees here in Canada a Prime Minister that wants to help him do it. Let's review the track record. He brought in a massive tax on energy that he wants to quadruple, which will drive our trucking, manufacturing, factories, and other businesses abroad. He raised taxes on investment. He's blocked key energy projects, and he's shipped $500 billion down to the United States. Is the Prime Minister auditioning to be the Secretary of Job Creation in the United States?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, once again, the Leader of the Opposition needs to get his facts straight. In the 9 years since we took office, foreign direct investment has increased by 60% in this country, so much so that we are now #1 per capita for foreign direct investment last year in the G20. Mr. Speaker, we continue to work hand in hand with the United States, with whatever administration, to protect jobs, to grow our economies. But what the American government will not understand is why the Conservative leader continues to refuse to get the security clearance necessary to protect Canadians, to protect us all from foreign interference.
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Mr. Speaker, 10 years ago, our per capita GDP, that's income per person, was equal to that in the United States. The New York Times said Canadians were richer and our workers were making more money. But since that time, the American economy has grown by 18% per person. And in Canada, it's actually smaller. We've had the worst per capita GDP decline of any G7 country since the year before COVID, all after this Prime Minister hiked taxes on investment, on work, on business, and unleashed a wicked attack on our energy sector. Again, why is it that he keeps trying to create jobs for Americans? Why don't we bring the jobs home?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
And Mr. Speaker, we see the Conservative leader cherry-picking his numbers. The reality is the IMF predicts Canada to have stronger economic growth next year than the United States. Full stop. What he is trying to do is continue to talk down our economy and pretend that maybe he's going to be able to deal with an American government that will not understand why he dropped defense spending to below 1% of GDP when he was last around the cabinet table, why he continues to refuse to get the necessary security clearance to get the briefings to keep his own caucus safe, much less all Canadians.
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Mr. Speaker, I can't think of anyone who would more favor quadrupling the carbon tax to 61 cents a litre in Canada than this Prime Minister. Right. Well, maybe there's one person.
Right.
I think perhaps President Trump wouldn't mind, because of course it will mean our trucking companies, our factories, our mines will all shut down and go south of the border where they will pay zero carbon tax. Mr. Speaker, we have enough to worry about with President Trump potentially imposing tariffs on Canadian companies. Why would our government impose tariffs on ourselves?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Once again, Mr. Speaker, the Leader of the Opposition demonstrates that he has no understanding that the only way to build a stronger economy for the future is also to protect the environment at the same time while putting more money back in the pockets of Canadians. The Canada Carbon Rebate puts more money back in the pockets of 8 out of 10 Canadians, according to the Parliamentary Budget Officer, according to top economists and environmentalists across the country. We're putting more money in people's pockets that the Leader of the Opposition wants to take away at a time where investments in jobs, in growth, in the future is more important than ever before.
L'honorable député de Belleuil-Chambly. L'honorable chef de l'opposition.
With the Prime Minister having capitulated and allowed President Trump to reimpose the softwood lumber tariffs that Stephen Harper had taken off, and now Biden having doubled those tariffs, our softwood industry hemorrhaging jobs. One way to boost the industry is to build some homes. It turns out I've got a common sense plan to cut the wasteful bureaucracy that has built zero homes and use the savings to axe the sales tax and boost home building by 30,000 new homes per year. Will the Prime Minister accept my common sense plan?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, the problem with the Leader of the Opposition's so-called plan is that it actually cuts billions of dollars of investments from municipalities across the country who are counting on it to build hundreds and even thousands of units of housing that Canadians so desperately need. His plan is, once again, cuts and austerity, fights with municipalities, fights with the provinces, not building the homes that matter for Canadians. Once again, he's completely out to lunch, demonstrating an unwillingness to help Canadians, except a willingness to help himself with political attacks.
That's right.
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Mr. Speaker, after 9 years, he's doubled housing costs, and Canada has the fewest homes per capita of any country in the G7. Maybe it's because his housing minister said of these $8 billion of bureaucracies, quote, the Housing Accelerator Fund doesn't go towards the cost of building houses. It actually doesn't lead to the construction of specific homes. The Housing Accelerator doesn't actually fund directly building homes. And it's built zero homes built with this bureaucracy. So why not follow my common sense plan to axe the sales tax and build the homes?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, 18 Conservative caucus members stood up and asked for housing investments in their municipalities across the country from this Housing Accelerator Fund that he is promising to cut. And Mr. Speaker, I'm going to channel my old job as a school teacher. The Leader of the Opposition actually spent a lot of time and effort rooting out which 18 members had asked for this money for their municipalities for housing. If he spent half as much time rooting out foreign interference as he did rooting out people who are asking for more housing, we might be better off as a country.
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
No, these MPs were just trying to solve the case of unsolved mysteries.
Yes.
Where are all these homes? Listen, can you point out any one of them? And so they wrote the minister 18 letters, and he got 18 letters, and he couldn't respond with even one home that his $8 billion bureaucracy has built. All these 18 MPs tried to help the hopeless minister. So let me try again with a real plan to build the homes. Axe the tax.
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, the MP for St. Albert Edmonton asked, the requested federal funding is critical to making this needed development a reality, a development that will help address the significant shortage of affordable housing options in the community. At the same time, the mayor of Butternut Valley in New Brunswick pointed out that this is a program we need, and even the local MP had said this funding will provide much needed housing in the
I don't like to interrupt the Prime Minister. He does have time left on his clock, but it was difficult for the Chair to decipher what was being said. I'm going to ask the Honourable Prime Minister to take it for the last 15 seconds, please, and so that I can hear what is happening or what the question is being answered. The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, the MP for Fundy Royal wrote, this half funding will provide much needed housing in this area. So much so that when the Leader of the Opposition announced he would cancel it, the mayor of Butternut Valley in that riding, Alan Brown, responded very strongly that this money will help build homes, and why is the Conservative leader blocking it?
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Speaker, he's got lots of politicians that love to receive other people's money, but he doesn't have any homes to show for it. And listen, he's too afraid to have a carbon tax election. Right. Let's have a compromise here. Why don't we have a housing tax election? Okay? Here's how it would work. The MPP Liberals will campaign on giving the billions more to bureaucracies, and we'll campaign on a plan to axe the tax and build the homes. What do you say? Housing tax?
Order. The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, the only so-called plan the Leader of the Opposition put forward is a plan for cuts and austerity, a plan to cut billions of dollars of investments that are needed by municipalities to unlock the building of thousands of homes. Why doesn't he want to see thousands of homes built across the country? Because he'd rather instrumentalize for his own political gain the sufferings and the challenges facing by Canadians rather than to solve the challenges. Just like he refuses to solve the challenge of foreign interference in his own caucus by refusing to get the necessary security briefings and security clearance that'll keep his caucus and Canadians safe.
You're losing your caucus.
The Honourable Member from Burnaby South. L'Honourable Chef de l'Opposition.
Speaker, it would be bad enough for the Prime Minister to want to give our energy jobs to the Americans who've doubled their production over the last couple of decades, but he wants to actually give it over to the Venezuelan, Iranian, and Russian dictatorships by cutting Canadian energy production by 35%. Mr. Speaker, the Americans reduced their emissions by more than, while ours went up, by increasing natural gas production and using it to replace dirty coal. We could do exactly the same. Why won't he follow a common sense plan to produce more clean, green Canadian energy rather than giving our jobs to dirty dictators?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Little performance was designed to distract from is the fact that under the Conservative government of Mr. Harper and that current leader, they couldn't get anything built. We built the Trans Mountain Pipeline extension. We built TMX. We understand that getting good prices for our oil was important, not just for Alberta, but for the entire Canadian economy. And we are moving forward to make sure that even as the oil companies are making record profits, we're putting a cap on emissions, not on production, not on profits, but on emissions, because Canadians care.
May I ask the Honourable Member from Lakelands please not take the floor unless he's recognized by the chair. The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Common sense Conservatives approved and saw the completion of 4 pipelines with no tax dollars to subsidize them. And we believe businesses should make money rather than take money. By contrast, this Prime Minister has pushed $100 billion of energy investment out of Canada, most of it into the United States. And once again, I can imagine that the champagne will be popping over at the Trump Tower when they find out how much more Canadian money this Prime Minister wants to send south. Why does he want to kill Canadian jobs? Why don't we bring home production and paychecks for our people?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
The Leader of the Opposition just admitted that he wouldn't have put a penny into TMX. He wouldn't have made it happen. This is something that matters to Alberta. It matters to the oil workers there.
Order. Order. The Right Honourable Prime Minister from the top, please.
Mr. Speaker, the Conservative leader just admitted he would not have invested in TMX. He would not have gotten it built. But, Mr. Speaker, on this side of the aisle, we will stand up for Alberta. We will stand up for oil and gas workers across the country, because we know that getting overseas markets for our oil and gas is
Colleagues, it should be possible for the Honourable Member from Lakelands, please. The Honourable Prime Minister, 25 seconds left, please.
Mr. Speaker, once again, we see that the Conservative leader will not stand up for workers across the country. He won't stand up for Albertan oil workers. We got the TMX pipeline built because we know that getting a better price for our oil by why being able to ship it across the Pacific is a way of creating jobs and prosperity that allow us to build strong jobs and economy for the future. The Conservative leader does not understand that we need to invest in workers to build a stronger future, not offer them cuts.
That's right.
That was hilarious.
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Mr. Speaker, when we were in government, we didn't have to offer $30 billion bailouts for pipelines because they made money. That's how business works. He wants to create a bailout economy, and let's clarify how this worked.
Yeah, let's.
$30 billion, $7 billion of which went to a Texas oil company, which took our tax dollars down to Texas to build American pipelines. Mr. Speaker, all our X's are in Texas. Why don't we bring home those jobs for Canada?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
You just heard it perfectly clearly.
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, we just heard it very clearly from the Leader of the Conservative Party. He would not have built the TMX pipeline. Mr. Speaker, we know how important it is to make sure we get a good price for our oil so we can invest in the kinds of solutions and technologies that are going to continue to create prosperity and opportunity for energy workers, not just in Alberta, but right across the country. We will continue to be there to invest in a stronger future by understanding that renewables are an important part of the future, but we need to be able to pay for them. The Conservative leader does not understand how to build a strong future or how to build a strong economy.
That's it.
L'honorable député de Belleuil-Chambly. L'honorable chef de l'opposition.
Mr. Speaker, given that we've just seen an American election, I think I can quote another American president who could aptly describe the Prime Minister's economic policy. If it moves, tax it. If it keeps moving, regulate it. If it stops moving, subsidize it. Instead of doing none of the above, which would allow our entrepreneurs to actually build things on their own without sticking taxpayers with the bill. He wants to know our common sense plan? We will repeal the unconstitutional C-69. We will scrap the cap. We will axe the tax. Why won't he call a carbon tax election so that we can bring home these jobs?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Speaker, when we stood up for Canadian jobs, Canadian oil producers, Canadian oil, steel and aluminum workers, the Conservative Party called that dumb, Mr. Speaker. We will always stand up and defend Canadian jobs, as we have in the past, as we create more opportunities for Canadians right across the country, and as we protect our national security. What the Americans will not understand is why the Leader of the Opposition, who desperately wants to become Prime Minister, refuses to get the necessary security clearances so he can keep his party safe.
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Mr. Speaker, I've already explained how $500 billion of our dollars have left the country since this Prime Minister took office. Canadian investment dollars paying American workers while our people can't afford food and homes. But don't take my word on how uninvestable the country has become. Take the word of carbon tax Carney. The Prime Minister's lead economic advisor has just moved his $100 billion company to New York City. If the Prime Minister's own top economic advisor doesn't have faith in his economic plan, then why should anyone else?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, what the Leader of the Conservative Party hasn't explained is why he's treating national security like a dodgeball game. He ducks allegations of foreign interference in his own caucus. He dives away from dives as he turns a blind eye towards investments in our communities by foreign interferers, and he dodges the tools necessary to keep his party safe. Why won't he get the briefing, get the clearance, protect Canadians?
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Mr. Speaker, the Prime Minister likes to spread crackpot conspiracy theories instead of defending his economic record. But why wouldn't he? When you've doubled housing costs, you distract. When you've doubled food bank use, you divide. When you've doubled gun crime, you use fear to turn people's attention away. And when you've doubled the national debt to a point that even your top economic advisor is fleeing the economic carnage you have created, you do anything possible to change the subject. If he can't defend his economic record, why not have a carbon tax election so that I can take it?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Can't even defend the members of his own caucus because he refuses to get the necessary security clearance. And he likes to talk about crackpot conspiracy theories. It's not a crackpot conspiracy theory when his own members of the National Security and Intelligence Committee of Parliamentarians signed a report that was released publicly that talks about the fact that the Indian government interfered in the past Conservative leadership campaigns. Or is that perhaps why he refuses to get the security clearance necessary, because he doesn't think he'd pass the security clearance because of Indian interference in his own...
Who do you have next? Huh? The Honourable Member from Kitchener-Conestoga. Chef de l'Opposition.
This Prime Minister is not worth the cost, crime, or corruption. We know that Parliament has been paralyzed for weeks now because he refuses to hand over evidence to the police in the $400 million Liberal slush fund scandal. Now we find out what he might be hiding. It turns out that his radical environment minister has a stake in one of the companies that got $10 million of those dollars. This is a scam, and by the way, the official that handed over the money had interest in the very same company. Is the Prime Minister covering this up because he's worried about the questions the police might have for his minister?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, despite the efforts of the Conservative leader to partisanize and polarize everything, we still live in a country where the police are independent, the judiciary is independent, and the RCMP has clearly stated that they don't need and don't particularly want the documents that the Leader of the Opposition is freezing Parliament over. We will continue to stand up for the integrity and the independence of our police services, and we will, while we're at it, continue to encourage the Leader of the Opposition to get the necessary security clearance to see the threats to Canadians and protect his own caucus.
Chef de l'Opposition.
Mr. Speaker, after the Prime Minister was caught paying $9 million tax dollars to buy a luxury, super exclusive condo on Billionaires Row for his media pal and diplomat in New York, Tom Clark, the diplomat in question, denied he had any involvement in it. Well, now we have documents showing that he said, and I quote, his housing required immediate replacement. It wasn't suitable for hosting or for living. Wow. Wait till he finds out about the 1,400 homeless encampments in Ontario, Mr. Speaker. Why, while Canadians live through housing hell, must they spend their tax dollars on a $9 million palace in the sky?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, at the same time as the Leader of the Opposition is playing silly games around partisanship and choosing to attack our hardworking diplomats and use people in homeless encampments as props while offering nothing but cuts of billions of dollars worth of investments, he is refusing to take seriously allegations made by the National Security and Intelligence Committee of Parliamentarians that his very leadership, the leadership in which that diplomat, as a former journalist, moderated, was interfered with by the Indian government.
Order. 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 Colleagues. The honourable member from Guelph.